Hunter finds a horse surrounded by bears. What happened next was breathtaking. The winter in Blackwood had always been harsh, but this year brought something different, something that went beyond the biting cold and the crushing silence. The wind howled through the ancient trees, blanketing everything in thick layers of snow, while ice crystallized the rivers, making the forest even more inhospitable. The residents were accustomed to the harsh routine of the season, but there was something unusual about this particular winter. Small details began to catch everyone's attention. Footprints where they shouldn't be, distant sounds that seemed to come from everywhere at once, and the strange sensation that something large was moving beyond the tree line. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Let us know which city you're watching from. Stay with us. Joseph Matthews had been the forest ranger in Blackwood for over 3 decades. His weathered face and keen eyes had seen everything these woods had to offer, or so he thought. Every morning, regardless of the weather, he would follow the same paths, checking the trails and ensuring the wildlife was managing through the bitter cold. He knew every curve of the forest, every hidden trail under the snow, and every mark the seasons left on the ancient trees. That morning started like any other. The temperature had dropped even further overnight, and the branches of the pine trees sagged under the weight of fresh snow. Joseph pulled his thick wool scarf tighter around his neck as he made his way along his usual route. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crunch of his boots in the snow and his steady breathing forming small clouds in the frigid air. Something in the distance caught his eye, a movement so subtle that at first he thought it might have been a trick of light on the snow, but years of experience had taught him to trust his instincts. He narrowed his eyes, focusing on the horizon where the white landscape met the dark line of trees. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. There, standing perfectly still at the edge of the forest, was a large brown horse. But it wasn't alone. 3 massive grizzly bears surrounded it. In all his years of service, Joseph had never witnessed anything like this. Any other horse would have been in a panic, trying desperately to escape. But this one stood its ground, calm and collected, as if the bears were old friends rather than natural predators. The bears moved slowly around the horse, their behavior completely at odds with everything Joseph knew about wild animals. They weren't hunting, they were protecting it. The scene before him defied everything he understood about nature. The horse's coat gleamed in the weak winter sunlight, its muscles rippling beneath as it occasionally shifted its weight from one leg to another. The bears, each one easily weighing over 800 pounds, moved with an almost graceful precision, creating a protective triangle around their unlikely companion. Joseph remained rooted to the spot, barely daring to breathe. He had seen bears before, plenty of them. He'd dealt with aggressive ones, hungry ones, mothers protecting their cubs. But these bears were different. Their movements were too coordinated, too purposeful. They moved as if they were following an unspoken command, their massive bodies in perfect synchronization with each other. The horse suddenly raised its head, its ears pricking forward. For a brief moment, Joseph could have sworn the animal was looking directly at him, even though he was well hidden and downwind. A shiver ran down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. The horse's eyes seemed to hold an intelligence that went beyond animal instinct. It was as if it was studying him, measuring him, deciding something crucial. The bears responded to some invisible signal, their massive heads turning in perfect unison to face the same direction. The horse took a step forward, its hooves breaking through the crusted snow with deliberate precision. The bears moved with it, maintaining their protective formation as the group began to make its way deeper into the forest. Joseph watched until they disappeared among the trees, his mind racing with questions he couldn't begin to answer. In 30 years of patrolling these mountains, he had never seen anything remotely like this. The interaction between the horse and the bears went against everything he knew about animal behavior. It wasn't just unusual, it was impossible. That evening, as the sun began to set and the temperature dropped even further, Joseph made his way to the local tavern. The warm glow from its windows was a welcome sight after the eerie events of the day. Inside, the usual crowd of locals huddled around the fireplace, sharing stories and seeking shelter from the bitter cold. Joseph ordered his usual drink and settled into his favorite corner spot, the weight of what he had witnessed still heavy on his mind. He didn't intend to share his story. Who would believe him? But as the evening wore on and the conversations flowed, he found himself speaking about what he had seen. At first, the other patrons reacted exactly as he expected, with disbelief and gentle mockery. Some suggested he had been working too hard, while others joked about the effects of the cold on one's imagination. The laughter in the tavern died down when Sarah Parker spoke up. The local farmer, known for her no-nonsense attitude and sharp mind, cleared her throat and set down her mug with deliberate slowness. "I saw them too," she said, her voice cutting through the ambient chatter like a knife through butter. "Last week, near the old Miller's Creek." The tavern fell silent. Sarah wasn't known for flights of fancy or tall tales. She was practical to a fault, more concerned with crop yields and weather patterns than ghost stories or local legends. Her words carried weight, and everyone knew it. "It was just before sunset," she continued, her eyes focused on something distant. "I was checking the fence line at the far end of my property when I saw them. 3 bears and a horse, moving together like they had been doing it all their lives. The horse, it was beautiful, unlike any I've seen around here. Strong, proud, with a coat the color of rich earth after rain." Joseph leaned forward, his heart racing. Sarah's description matched exactly what he had seen. The other patrons listened intently as she described how the bears had positioned themselves around the horse, their movements coordinated and purposeful. It was the same formation he had witnessed that morning. Word spread quickly through the small town of Blackwood. In the days that followed, more people came forward with similar stories. Linda Thompson, who lived on the outskirts of town, reported seeing the group near her property at dawn. Marcus Chen, the local postman, swore he had spotted them while delivering mail to the remote houses along the forest edge. Each account added new details to the growing mystery. Some spoke of strange markings in the snow around where the group had been seen. Others mentioned an unusual silence that fell over the forest whenever the animals appeared. The local wildlife seemed to vanish when the horse and its ursine guardians were near, as if giving them a wide berth. The phenomenon began to attract attention from beyond Blackwood's borders. Amateur photographers and nature enthusiasts started arriving in town, hoping to catch a glimpse of the unusual alliance. Local businesses saw an unexpected surge in winter visitors, all drawn by the stories of the horse and its bear protectors. But not everyone welcomed the attention. Many of the townspeople felt protective of their forest and its mysteries. They worried that too much human interference might disturb whatever delicate balance had been struck between these unlikely companions. Some refused to reveal where they had seen the animals, wanting to preserve the sanctity of whatever was unfolding in their forest. Joseph found himself at the center of it all, much to his discomfort. As the local forest ranger, people constantly sought him out for information and guidance. They wanted to know where to look, what to watch for, how to stay safe if they encountered the group. He did his best to manage the situation, emphasizing the importance of maintaining distance and respecting the animal's space. But something about the whole situation troubled him deeply. In all his years of working with wildlife, he had never seen animals behave this way. The coordination between the bears was unprecedented, and the horses' calm demeanor in their presence defied explanation. There had to be more to the story, something they weren't seeing. One evening, as he was reviewing his patrol logs, Joseph noticed a pattern emerging. The sightings weren't random. They followed a rough circuit through the forest, appearing in certain areas at specific times. It was as if the group was patrolling the forest, much like he did. But what were they guarding? What could be so important that it would unite natural adversaries in such an extraordinary way? The answer came from an unexpected source. Martha Wilson, the town's librarian and local historian, had been quietly researching similar incidents in Blackwood's past. She discovered old journals and documents that hinted at previous instances of unusual animal behavior in the forest. According to these records, every few generations, something would stir in the depths of Blackwood Forest, leading to strange alliances between different species. The most intriguing account came from a journal dated 1892. A trapper had described seeing wolves and deer moving together through the forest, apparently working in concert to guard something. The account was dismissed as fantasy at the time, but in light of recent events, it took on new significance. As winter deepened, the sightings continued, but something else began to change. People reported hearing strange sounds in the forest at night, not the usual calls of nocturnal animals, but something deeper, more resonant. Some described it as a humming that seemed to come from the earth itself. Others spoke of lights moving through the trees, like fragments of the aurora borealis that had broken free and drifted down to earth. The mystery of Blackwood Forest was growing deeper, and with each passing day, more questions arose than answers. The horse and its bear guardians seemed to be just one part of a much larger puzzle, one that had roots stretching back through the town's history. But what was truly happening in the depths of the forest remained elusive, like a word on the tip of the tongue, just out of reach. News of the mysterious events in Blackwood spread far beyond the small town's borders, eventually reaching the ears of Aiden Hawk. Known throughout the region as an expert tracker and wildlife specialist, Aiden had built his reputation on documenting rare animal behaviors and tracking elusive creatures. When he first heard about the horse and its bear guardians, he dismissed it as another small-town legend, the kind that typically emerged during long winter nights. However, as more evidence surfaced, photographs, albeit blurry ones, and consistent eyewitness accounts from reliable sources, his skepticism began to waver. The descriptions were too specific, too consistent to be mere fabrication. The final push came when he received a series of images from a trusted colleague showing distinct tracks in the snow, bear prints and horse hooves moving in perfect synchronization, following patterns that defied natural behavior. Aiden arrived in Blackwood on a particularly cold morning, the kind where breath freezes in the air and every step on snow sounds like breaking glass. He checked into the local inn under the pretense of conducting a winter wildlife survey, careful not to reveal his true intentions. The locals were known to be protective of their forest and its mysteries, and he'd learned from experience that small towns could quickly become hostile to outsiders who showed too much interest in their secrets. The inn's owner, Eleanor Matthews, seemed friendly enough as she showed him to his room, but there was a guardedness in her eyes when he asked casual questions about recent animal sightings in the area. "The forest has its own ways," she said cryptically, her weathered hands smoothing down the bed's quilt. "Some things aren't meant to be understood, just respected." That evening, Aiden sat in a corner of the inn's restaurant, maintaining a low profile while observing the locals. Conversations around him frequently turned to the mysterious group in the forest, but he noticed how people lowered their voices when discussing specific locations or recent sightings. There was an unspoken agreement among the townspeople: protect the secret, guard the mystery. He spent the next day preparing his equipment: cameras with night vision capabilities, tracking devices, and his most sophisticated recording equipment. If there was something unusual happening in Blackwood Forest, he intended to document it properly. But as he checked his gear, a nagging feeling grew in his gut. Something about this case felt different from his previous expeditions. The forest itself seemed to resist his presence. As he ventured out for a preliminary survey, he noticed how the usual wildlife signs disappeared around him. The normal chorus of winter birds fell silent, and even the tracks of small animals seemed to vanish mysteriously. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath, watching and waiting. Near sunset, he discovered his first significant clue. In a small clearing, he found a series of markings on several trees. They weren't the usual claw marks left by bears marking their territory. These were different, almost deliberate in their pattern. The cuts were deep, arranged in sequences that seemed to repeat. Aiden had studied indigenous languages and ancient symbols throughout his career, but these marks didn't match anything he'd seen before. As he documented the markings, the air around him changed. The temperature dropped suddenly, and an unnatural silence fell over the forest. Even the constant whisper of wind through the trees ceased. Aiden's years of experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and every one of them was now screaming that he wasn't alone. He scanned the surrounding trees, his trained eyes searching for any sign of movement. The failing light created shadows that seemed to shift and change, playing tricks on his vision. But there was something else, something his rational mind struggled to process. The shadows didn't move quite right. They seemed to flow against the wind, gathering in places where they shouldn't be. Taking careful notes of his location and the strange markings, Aiden decided to retreat for the day. He needed to review his findings and plan his next move carefully. This wasn't going to be like his other expeditions. He could feel it in his bones. Whatever was happening in Blackwood Forest required a different approach. Back in his room at the inn, Aiden spread out his notes and photographs. The tree markings, when arranged in sequence, seemed to form a pattern that radiated outward from a central point in the forest. If his calculations were correct, all the reported sightings of the horse and bears formed a rough circle around this same area. As he worked late into the night, connecting dots on his map and cross-referencing sighting locations, a pattern began to emerge. The horse and its bear guardians weren't just wandering randomly. They were patrolling, protecting something. But what could be so important that it would cause natural enemies to become allies? What force could override the most basic instincts of wild animals? The answer, Aiden suspected, lay somewhere in that central point his research had revealed. Tomorrow, he would venture deeper into the forest, following the patterns he'd discovered. But as he finally prepared for bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't really the hunter here. In Blackwood Forest, something else was in control, and he was walking willingly into its domain. Dawn broke over Blackwood with an eerie stillness. The sky was a palette of deep purples and greys, with no birdsong to herald the new day. Aiden left the inn before anyone else was stirring, his backpack loaded with equipment and supplies for a full day of tracking. The snow from the previous night had left a pristine blank canvas, perfect for reading the story of whatever had passed through the forest in the dark hours. The temperature had dropped even further overnight, and ice crystals hung in the air, creating halos around everything they touched. Aiden's breath came out in thick white clouds as he made his way toward the area where all his calculated patterns converged. He moved slowly, methodically, taking care to document everything he saw. The forest felt different today, more aware, if such a thing was possible. The first sign that he was on the right track came about 2 hours into his trek. The snow ahead was disturbed in a way that made him pause. 3 sets of bear tracks and 1 set of horse prints moved together in perfect formation, just as the reports had described. But there was something else. Something that made his hands shake slightly as he took photographs. Between the tracks, the snow was marked with strange impressions, as if something heavy had been dragging itself along, yet leaving no clear pattern that could identify what kind of creature had made them. Following the trails, Aiden noticed other anomalies. The usual signs of winter wildlife. Rabbit tracks, fox prints, even the trails of small rodents all seemed to veer away from this path, creating a strange corridor through the forest where only the horse and bears had traveled. The trees here were different too. Their bark was marked with those same mysterious symbols he'd seen before, but these were deeper, more elaborate, forming complex patterns that seemed to pulse with an inner light when caught at certain angles. As he moved deeper into the forest, the air grew thicker, heavier somehow. The silence became more pronounced, broken only by the occasional crack of a branch somewhere in the distance. Aiden's scientific mind struggled to categorize what he was experiencing. The temperature would drop suddenly in specific spots, then rise again a few feet away. His compass began to behave erratically, the needle spinning wildly before settling in random directions. Near midday, he reached a clearing that stopped him in his tracks. The snow here was meticulously cleared in a perfect circle, as if swept away by some invisible force. At the center stood 3 ancient oak trees, their trunks twisted together in an impossible embrace. Their branches reached toward the sky like gnarled fingers, and the symbols carved into their bark were unlike anything he'd seen in his research. These weren't just random marks. They told a story, one written in a language lost to time. Aiden approached the trees carefully, his camera clicking rapidly as he documented every detail. The air here felt charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. As he moved closer to examine the markings, something caught his eye. Partially buried in the snow at the base of the trees was an object that seemed to gleam with its own inner light. He reached down to brush away the snow, but before his fingers could touch it, a sound froze him in place. The horse's appearance was sudden and silent. One moment the clearing was empty, and the next it stood there, its brown coat almost glowing in the weak winter light. The 3 bears emerged from different directions, moving with that same unnatural coordination that defied everything Aiden knew about wild animals. They took up positions around the horse, forming a perfect triangle, their massive bodies blocking any possible escape route. Aiden remained absolutely still, his heart pounding in his chest. The horse's eyes fixed on him with an intelligence that sent chills down his spine. These weren't the eyes of a normal animal. They held knowledge, purpose, and something else he couldn't quite define. The bears, too, watched him with an awareness that went beyond natural instinct. The air in the clearing grew colder, and the light seemed to bend in strange ways. Shadows deepened where they shouldn't, and the symbols on the trees began to emit a faint, pulsing glow. Aiden's scientific training warred with what his senses were telling him. There was something here, something ancient and powerful, that defied rational explanation. The horse took a step forward, its hooves making no sound in the snow. The bears moved with it, maintaining their perfect formation. Aiden felt a presence behind him, something massive and ancient, but he didn't dare turn around. The horse's gaze held him in place, communicating something beyond words. This wasn't just about unusual animal behavior anymore. He was standing on the edge of a mystery that went far deeper than he had imagined. The clearing had become unnaturally still, as if time itself was holding its breath. Aiden's trained senses picked up subtle changes in the environment that his scientific mind struggled to process. The air had taken on a strange quality, thick and heavy, like being underwater. The symbols carved into the ancient oaks pulsed with a faint luminescence that seemed to respond to the presence of the horse and its bear guardians. The horse stood perfectly still, its eyes fixed on Aiden with an intensity that made his skin prickle. There was something in that gaze, a depth of awareness, a silent communication that transcended normal animal behavior. The bears maintained their triangular formation, but their usual predatory stance was replaced by something more ceremonial, almost ritualistic in nature. As Aiden watched, transfixed, the horse began to paw at the ground in a deliberate pattern. Its hooves moved with precise, measured strikes, creating marks in the snow that aligned perfectly with the symbols carved into the trees. The bears responded to this action with a synchronized movement, each one taking exactly 3 steps forward, maintaining their perfect triangular formation. The temperature dropped further, and Aiden's breath came out in thick, white clouds that hung motionless in the air. The shadows around the clearing began to move in ways that defied natural law, flowing against the weak sunlight like liquid darkness. The symbols on the trees pulsed stronger now, their glow creating patterns of light that danced across the snow. Something caught Aiden's attention at the edge of his vision, movement in the spaces between the trees. At first he thought it was just the play of light and shadow, but as he focused, he realized there was something more. Shapes moved in the darkness, forms that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. The forest itself appeared to be awakening, stirring with an ancient energy that had lain dormant for countless years. The horse suddenly raised its head, ears pricked forward, responding to something Aiden couldn't perceive. The bears reacted instantly, their massive bodies tensing in perfect unison. A sound filled the clearing. Not quite a roar, not quite a whisper, but something in between that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was like the voice of the forest itself, speaking in a language lost to time. Aiden's equipment began to malfunction. His camera shut down despite its fresh batteries, and his compass spun wildly before cracking its glass face. The temperature dropped so low that frost began forming on his clothes, creating intricate patterns that mimicked the symbols on the trees. He wanted to run, every instinct screaming at him to flee, but his body remained frozen in place, held by some force he couldn't understand. The horse took another step forward, and the snow beneath its hooves began to glow with a soft, blue-white light. The bears moved in perfect synchronization, their paws leaving illuminated prints in the snow. The patterns they created seemed to form a larger symbol, one that spread across the entire clearing. Aiden realized with a start that they weren't just moving randomly. They were performing some kind of ancient ceremony, following steps laid down long before humans had named this forest. As the light from the snow grew stronger, Aiden noticed something emerging from the ground where the horse had been pawing. At first, it looked like ice crystals growing in accelerated time, but as the formation continued, he realized it was something else entirely. The crystalline structure took on complex geometric patterns, forming shapes that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The bears began to emit a low, rhythmic sound, not quite a growl, but a deep vibration that resonated with the symbols on the trees. The horse responded with a soft nickering that sounded almost like words in a language Aiden couldn't quite grasp. The air itself seemed to thicken further, taking on an almost visible quality, shimmering with possibilities and ancient magic. In that moment, Aiden understood that he had stumbled upon something far more significant than unusual animal behavior. The horse and bears weren't just acting against their nature. They were part of something older than nature itself, something that had existed in these woods long before humans had drawn their first maps or built their first settlements. The crystalline formation continued to grow, its geometric patterns becoming more complex with each passing moment. Aiden stood transfixed, his scientific mind struggling to categorize what he was witnessing. The structure seemed to pulse with an inner light that synchronized perfectly with the glowing symbols on the ancient oaks. The horse and its bear guardians remained in their positions, maintaining what he now recognized as some sort of ceremonial arrangement. A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, but it wasn't natural. Instead of moving branches and disturbing the snow, it seemed to carry whispers, fragments of sounds that might have been words in a language too ancient to comprehend. The horse's ears twitched in response to these whispers, and the bears shifted their massive bodies in perfect unison, as if following instructions that only they could hear. The temperature fluctuated wildly now, dropping so low that ice crystals formed in the air, then rising suddenly until the snow began to melt in perfect circles around the animals' feet. The shadows between the trees had taken on an almost solid quality, moving and shifting like living things. Aiden's training told him to document everything, but his equipment continued to malfunction, leaving him with nothing but his own senses to record these impossible events. The horse began to move in a precise pattern, its hooves leaving trails of light in the snow. The bears followed, their movements creating additional patterns that interlocked with those of the horse. Together, they were drawing something, a massive symbol that spread across the entire clearing. Aiden recognized elements from the tree carvings in their movements, but this was larger, more complex, and seemingly alive with purpose. As the pattern neared completion, the crystalline structure at the center of the clearing began to change. What had started as simple geometric shapes was now forming into something more defined. Aiden could see what looked like ancient writing emerging within the crystal, glowing scripts that twisted and changed as he watched. Some resembled the markings on the trees, while others were entirely different, seemingly older and more primal. The forest around them had fallen into an impossible silence, as if every living thing was holding its breath in anticipation. Even the wind had stopped, leaving the air thick and heavy with potential. The horse raised its head high, and for a brief moment, Aiden saw its eyes glowing with the same inner light as the crystals. The bears responded with a synchronized movement, their massive bodies shifting to form a new pattern around the horse. Something was stirring in the depths of the forest, something vast and ancient that had slumbered for countless years. Aiden could feel its presence, like a physical weight, pressing against his consciousness. The shadows between the trees had become deeper, more substantial, moving with purpose rather than following the natural play of light and dark. The horse nickered softly, but the sound that emerged wasn't anything like a normal horse's call. It was melodic, almost like singing, and it seemed to resonate with the symbols on the trees and the crystalline structure at the center of the clearing. The bears added their own voices, creating a harmony that made the air itself vibrate with power. The ground beneath Aiden's feet began to pulse with a gentle rhythm, like a massive heartbeat deep within the earth. The snow around him started to melt in intricate patterns, revealing the forest floor beneath. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. The entire clearing was marked with ancient symbols, carved into the very bedrock that had been hidden beneath centuries of growth and weather. These weren't random markings or the result of natural processes. They were too precise, too intentional. The horse and bears hadn't just been walking through the forest, they had been following these hidden pathways, tracing patterns that had been laid down ages ago. Their seemingly random appearances around Blackwood had actually been part of something much larger, a ceremony or ritual that had been playing out unnoticed beneath the feet of the townspeople. As this realization struck him, Aiden became aware of movement behind him. Something large was approaching through the trees. The horse and bears showed no sign of alarm, but their attention had shifted, focusing on whatever was coming. The air grew even thicker, and the whispers in the wind became more distinct, almost comprehensible. He could feel the presence of something ancient and powerful, something that had watched over these woods long before humans had ever set foot in them. The presence behind Aiden grew stronger, but something kept him from turning around. The horse's gaze held him in place, its eyes communicating a clear warning. Stay still. Stay quiet. Observe. The bears remained in their positions, their massive bodies creating a perfect triangle that seemed to pulse with energy in sync with the glowing crystals. The air grew heavy with an ancient scent, something like pine needles and frost, but deeper, more primal. It carried memories of times when the forest was younger, when magic still flowed openly through the world. The shadows between the trees had become almost solid now, moving with purpose and awareness that defied natural law. The crystalline formation at the center of the clearing had grown into a complex structure that seemed to capture and refract light in impossible ways. Within its faceted surface, Aiden could see images forming and dissolving, glimpses of the forest through different ages, seasons passing in seconds, trees growing and changing in the blink of an eye. It was like watching the entire history of Blackwood played out in fragments of light and shadow. The horse suddenly lifted its head higher, its ears pricked forward in attention. The bears responded with a synchronized movement, their bodies shifting slightly to widen their formation. The ground beneath them began to pulse with a stronger rhythm, and the ancient symbols carved into the bedrock started to emit a soft, blue-white glow that matched the light from the crystals. A sound filled the clearing. Not quite a voice, not quite music, but something in between that seemed to bypass Aiden's ears and speak directly to his mind. It carried images and emotions rather than words, the forest in its infancy, the first animals finding shelter beneath its branches, the slow dance of seasons across centuries. He saw the horse and bears, but not as they appeared now. They were something more, something older, guardians who had watched over these woods since time immemorial. The wind picked up, but it moved in impossible ways, spiraling around the clearing in patterns that matched the symbols on the ground and trees. The snow began to lift and swirl, not chaotically, but in precise geometric shapes that wove together like an intricate dance. Through this curtain of swirling snow and light, Aiden caught glimpses of something massive moving in the shadows of the ancient oaks. The horse nickered again, but the sound it made was unlike anything Aiden had ever heard. It was like a key turning in an ancient lock, a signal that set something in motion. The bears responded with their own calls, their voices harmonizing in ways that bear voices should not be able to harmonize. The sound they created together seemed to resonate with the very earth beneath their feet. The crystals in the center of the clearing pulsed brighter, their light revealing more of the symbols hidden beneath the snow. Aiden realized that the entire forest floor was covered in these markings, creating a vast network of interconnected patterns. The horse and its bear guardians hadn't been randomly wandering, they had been following these ancient paths, maintaining something crucial to the forest's existence. As this understanding dawned on him, the presence behind him grew stronger. The air became thick with an energy that made his skin tingle and his breath catch in his throat. The horse's eyes locked with his, and in that moment, Aiden saw something that challenged everything he thought he knew about the natural world. In those deep brown eyes, he saw knowledge and power that stretched back to the dawn of time. The bears shifted their positions again, moving with that uncanny precision that defied their massive size. Their new arrangement created another pattern on the ground, one that made the symbols glow even brighter. The horse stepped forward, its hooves striking the earth in a deliberate rhythm that sent pulses of light racing through the network of ancient markings. Through the swirling snow and dancing lights, Aiden began to understand that he wasn't just witnessing unusual animal behavior or some unexplained natural phenomenon. He was seeing something that had existed in these woods since before humans had names for such things. A power that had shaped the forest and everything in it. A force that had chosen these unlikely guardians to protect its ancient secrets. The air in the clearing had become almost liquid with power, thick with ancient magic that seemed to pulse in time with the glowing symbols beneath the snow. Aiden stood transfixed as the horse and its bear guardians continued their mysterious ritual, their movements creating patterns of light that danced across the forest floor. The presence behind him had grown stronger, more defined, yet something held him back from turning to face it. The crystalline formation at the center of the clearing had transformed into something that defied description, a structure that seemed to exist in more dimensions than should be possible. Light bent and refracted through its faceted surface in ways that made Aiden's eyes water when he tried to follow the patterns. Within its depths, images continued to form and dissolve. The forest in different seasons, in different ages, showing glimpses of a history that had never been recorded in any human book. The horse's movements had become more deliberate, each step precise and measured. Its hooves struck the ground in a rhythm that seemed to resonate with the ancient symbols carved into the bedrock. The bears moved in perfect synchronization, their massive bodies flowing with a grace that should have been impossible for creatures of their size. Together, they were weaving something, a pattern of light and shadow that was gradually taking shape across the entire clearing. Snow continued to swirl around them, but it no longer fell naturally. Instead, it moved in geometric patterns that mirrored the symbols on the ground and trees. The wind carried whispers that seemed almost comprehensible now, fragments of a language older than human speech, words that spoke of secrets buried deep in the heart of the forest. Through the shifting curtain of snow, Aiden caught glimpses of movement among the trees. Shadows that seemed more solid than they should be, forms that changed and shifted when viewed directly. The forest itself appeared to be awakening, stirring with an energy that had lain dormant for countless years. The ancient oaks creaked and swayed, their branches moving against the wind, reaching toward the center of the clearing like gnarled fingers. The horse suddenly raised its head high, its eyes glowing with an inner light that matched the pulsing crystals. The bears responded with a synchronized movement that sent ripples of energy through the network of glowing symbols. The ground beneath them trembled slightly, not with danger, but with recognition, as if something deep within the earth was responding to their call. Aiden's scientific mind struggled to process what he was witnessing. Everything he knew about animal behavior, about the natural world, was being challenged by what was unfolding before him. The horse and bears weren't just acting against their nature, they were transcending it, serving as conduits for something far more ancient and powerful than mere instinct. The crystals in the center of the clearing pulsed brighter, their light revealing more of the vast network of symbols that covered the forest floor. Each marking seemed to tell part of a story, not in words or pictures, but in patterns of energy that spoke directly to something deep within Aiden's consciousness. He saw the forest as it had been thousands of years ago, when the first guardians had been chosen to protect its secrets. The wind picked up again, but it moved with purpose and intelligence, creating spirals of snow and light that wove between the trees like living things. The horse nickered softly, the sound carrying that same strange, melodic quality that seemed more like speech than animal vocalization. The bears added their voices, creating a harmony that made the air itself vibrate with power. Behind Aiden, the presence had grown so strong that it seemed to press against his very thoughts. The horse's eyes held his gaze, communicating something urgent and profound. In those ancient depths, he saw recognition, not of him as an individual, but of something he represented. A potential, perhaps, or a role in whatever vast ceremony was unfolding in this hidden corner of Blackwood Forest. The clearing had become a vortex of ancient power, with the horse and bears at its center, their movements orchestrating something beyond human understanding. The crystalline structure pulsed with increasing intensity, its faceted surfaces reflecting impossible images of the forest through different ages. Aiden remained rooted to the spot, his entire being focused on the extraordinary scene unfolding before him. The three bears moved with fluid grace, their massive bodies flowing through complex patterns that seemed to weave the very fabric of reality. The horse directed their movements with subtle shifts of its head and body, its eyes glowing with that otherworldly intelligence that had first captured Aiden's attention. Together, they were creating something, a bridge, perhaps, between the world he knew and something far older and more mysterious. The symbols beneath the snow had begun to shift and change, rearranging themselves into new patterns that spread outward from the central crystal formation. Each new configuration sent pulses of light racing through the network of ancient markings, like ripples in a pond. The air itself seemed to thicken with each pulse, becoming heavy with the weight of accumulated time and memory. Through the swirling snow and dancing lights, Aiden caught glimpses of other movements in the forest. Shadows that seemed to have substance, forms that appeared and disappeared between one heartbeat and the next. The wind carried fragments of sound that might have been voices, speaking in languages that had been forgotten long before humans had built their first settlements in these woods. The horse suddenly turned its gaze directly to Aiden, and in that moment, he felt the full weight of its ancient awareness. This wasn't just an animal, it was a guardian, chosen by forces beyond human comprehension to protect something vital to the forest's existence. The bears, too, were more than they appeared, their role in this mysterious ritual far more significant than mere protectors. The crystalline formation had grown more complex, its geometric patterns shifting and evolving like a living thing. Within its depths, Aiden could see images forming with greater clarity, glimpses of the forest in different seasons, in different ages, showing him things that no human eye had witnessed for countless generations. He saw the first guardians being chosen, saw the power of the forest flowing into them, transforming them into something more than mere animals. The ground beneath his feet trembled slightly, not with threat, but with recognition. The ancient symbols pulsed brighter, their light revealing more of the vast network that spread throughout the forest. Aiden realized that what he had initially taken for random animal behavior was actually part of an ancient ritual, one that had been performed in these woods since time immemorial. The bears moved again, their synchronization perfect as they created new patterns on the snow-covered ground. Their massive paws left trails of light that interwove with the existing symbols, adding layers of complexity to whatever ceremony was taking place. The horse watched their movements with obvious approval, its presence becoming more commanding with each passing moment. Behind Aiden, the unseen presence had grown stronger still. The air seemed to bend and twist around it, creating distortions in the very fabric of reality. The horse's eyes flickered between him and whatever stood behind him, communicating something urgent and profound. There was a choice to be made here, though Aiden didn't yet understand what that choice might be. The wind picked up again, moving in impossible spirals that defied natural law. Snow swirled upward in precise geometric patterns, creating momentary structures of ice and light that mirrored the symbols on the ground. The horse nickered softly, the sound carrying that strange melodic quality that seemed more like ancient speech than animal vocalization. The bears responded with their own harmonious calls, weaving a sound that made the air itself vibrate with power. The forest had transformed into something beyond Aiden's understanding, a place where the barriers between the natural and supernatural had grown thin and permeable. The horse and its bear guardians continued their intricate dance, weaving patterns of light and shadow that seemed to reshape reality itself. The crystalline formation at the center of the clearing had become a nexus of power, its facetted surfaces reflecting impossible visions of past and present merged into one. The wind that swept through the clearing carried fragments of ancient knowledge, whispers of secrets that had been kept hidden since the world was young. The bears moved with their uncanny grace, their massive bodies flowing through formations that defied their natural abilities. The horse stood at the center of it all, its presence growing more commanding with each passing moment, its eyes holding wisdom that stretched back to the dawn of time. Snow continued to swirl in geometric patterns, creating ephemeral structures that mirrored the ancient symbols glowing beneath the forest floor. The entire clearing had become a vast canvas of light and shadow, each pattern and symbol telling part of a story that had never been recorded in any human history. Aiden found himself able to read these patterns now, though not with his eyes or mind. Something deeper within him responded to their ancient meaning. The presence behind him had grown so strong that it seemed to bend space itself, creating distortions in the air that rippled like heat waves in summer. Yet still, something held him back from turning to look. Some instinctive understanding that the time wasn't right, that there were things he needed to comprehend first. The horse suddenly raised its head high, its eyes blazing within a light. The bears responded instantly, moving into a new formation that sent pulses of energy racing through the network of glowing symbols. The ground trembled slightly, and the ancient oaks creaked and swayed, their branches reaching toward the center of the clearing like gnarled fingers trying to grasp something just out of reach. Through the crystalline structure, Aiden began to see images with greater clarity, not just glimpses now, but full visions of the forest's past. He saw the first guardians being chosen, saw how the power of the forest had flowed into them, transforming them into something more than mere animals. He saw how they had protected these woods through countless ages, keeping its secrets safe from those who would exploit them. The horse nickered softly, the sound carrying that strange melodic quality that seemed more like language than animal vocalization. The bears added their voices, creating a harmony that made the air itself vibrate with power. The symbols beneath the snow pulsed brighter with each note, their light revealing more of the vast network that spread throughout the forest. Aiden realized that the patterns the horse and bears had been creating weren't random. They were words in an ancient language, a story written in light and shadow across the forest floor. Each movement, each carefully placed step added another line to this tale, building toward something momentous. The crystalline formation pulsed with increasing intensity, its light seeming to gather and concentrate at its center. The horse's eyes locked with Aiden's, and in that moment he felt the full weight of its ancient awareness. This wasn't just about unusual animal behavior or unexplained phenomena. This was about something far more significant, something that had been waiting in these woods since before humans had names for such things. The clearing had become a vortex of ancient power, with light and shadow dancing in patterns that defied natural law. The horse stood at the center of it all, its presence now unmistakably otherworldly, while the bears maintained their protective formation with supernatural precision. The crystalline structure pulsed with a rhythm that matched the beating of Aiden's heart, as if the very essence of the forest had synchronized with his own life force. Through the swirling snow and ethereal light, Aiden began to understand the true significance of what he was witnessing. The horse and bears weren't just random animals who had formed an unlikely alliance. They were chosen guardians, selected by forces older than humanity itself, to protect something precious hidden within these ancient woods. Their coordinated movements, their impossible harmony, all served a purpose that stretched back through countless generations. The wind carried whispers of ancient secrets, fragments of knowledge that seemed to bypass his ears and speak directly to his soul. The bears moved with their uncanny grace, their massive bodies flowing through formations that told stories in a language of movement and light. The horse watched it all with those knowing eyes, directing this elaborate ceremony with subtle shifts of its head and body. The crystalline formation had become a window into the forest's past, showing Aiden visions of things that had transpired in these woods over centuries. He saw other guardians who had come before, different animals in different ages, all chosen to protect the forest's ancient mysteries. Each generation had added their own marks to the vast network of symbols that spread beneath the snow, creating a living record of their stewardship. Suddenly, the horse stepped forward, its hooves striking the ground in a precise rhythm that sent pulses of light racing through the network of glowing symbols. The bears responded with perfect synchronization, their movements creating new patterns that interwove with the existing ones. The air itself seemed to thicken and twist, bending reality around them as the ceremony reached its crescendo. The presence behind Aiden had grown so powerful that it seemed to press against his very thoughts. The horse's eyes met his once more, and in that moment he felt something shift within himself. Understanding flooded through him, not in words or images but in pure knowledge that settled into his consciousness like memories he had always possessed but somehow forgotten. He saw the truth of Blackwood Forest, not just as it appeared to human eyes, but as it truly was. A nexus of ancient power, a place where the boundaries between worlds had grown thin over countless millennia. The horse and bears were more than mere guardians. They were anchors, helping to maintain the delicate balance that kept these worlds separate yet connected. The crystalline formation pulsed brighter, its facetted surfaces reflecting impossible visions of past, present, and potential futures merged into one. Aiden watched as the pattern the Guardians had been creating throughout their ritual finally became complete. The entire clearing now glowed with an intricate web of light, each symbol and marking perfectly aligned to form something vast and meaningful. The horse nickered softly, but the sound it made was like no animal voice Aiden had ever heard. It was music and language combined, carrying meanings that transcended ordinary communication. The bears added their voices to this ancient song, creating harmonies that made the air itself vibrate with power and purpose. Through the crystal's shifting facets, Aiden could now see the full scope of what the Guardians protected. It wasn't just the forest itself, but something more fundamental, a connection to powers and possibilities that modern humanity had forgotten existed. The horse and its bear companions were part of an ancient lineage, chosen to ensure that this connection remained intact, hidden from those who might misuse it. The clearing had become a nexus of pure energy, where ancient magic flowed freely between earth and sky. The horse stood majestically at its center, its presence now unmistakably otherworldly, while the bears maintained their protective formation with supernatural precision. The crystalline structure pulsed with a light that seemed to come from the dawn of time itself, illuminating truths that had been hidden for countless ages. Aiden understood now why he had been drawn to this place, why his path had led him to witness this ancient ceremony. The horse's eyes met his once more, conveying wisdom that transcended ordinary understanding. This wasn't just about documenting unusual animal behavior. It was about becoming part of something far more profound, a tradition that stretched back to the very roots of the world. The bears moved with their impossible grace, their synchronized movements adding final touches to the vast pattern they had created across the forest floor. The network of glowing symbols told a story that couldn't be translated into any human language. It spoke of guardianship, of balance, of powers that flowed through the natural world like invisible rivers of light. Through the crystalline formation, Aiden watched as visions of past and present merged into one continuous stream of understanding. He saw how the forest had chosen its guardians throughout the ages, how each generation had added their own marks to this ancient tapestry. The horse and bears were just the latest in a long line of protectors, chosen to maintain the delicate balance between the seen and unseen worlds. The wind that swept through the clearing carried whispers of ancient knowledge, fragments of wisdom that settled into Aiden's consciousness like snow falling on soft ground. The presence behind him had grown so powerful that it seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, bending space and time around its ancient awareness. Finally, the horse took 3 deliberate steps forward, its hooves striking the earth in a rhythm that made the entire network of symbols pulse with blinding light. The bears moved in perfect harmony, their massive bodies flowing through positions that completed the complex ceremony. The air itself seemed to crystallize with power, freezing this moment in time like an insect in amber. Aiden felt something shift within the fabric of reality itself. The forest was accepting him as a witness, allowing him to carry this knowledge forward, not to expose or exploit, but to protect and preserve. The horse's final gesture was both a blessing and a warning. These secrets were not meant for the world at large, but for those who understood their true significance. The crystalline formation began to pulse with decreasing intensity, its light gradually fading like the last rays of a setting sun. The bears settled into relaxed positions, their role in the ceremony complete. The horse remained standing proud and tall, its transformation from mere animal to ancient guardian now complete and undeniable. As the powerful energies began to settle, Aiden realized that he had been given a rare gift. Not just the opportunity to witness this incredible phenomenon, but the responsibility to protect its secret. The horse's eyes held his one last time, conveying a final message of trust and expectation. This was not the end of the story, but rather his initiation into a much larger narrative. The wind carried one last whisper through the clearing, a promise as old as the forest itself. The bears and the horse had shown him that there were still mysteries in the world, powers that operated beyond human understanding. His role now was not to explain or expose, but to protect and preserve, ensuring that the ancient magic of Blackwood Forest remained safe for future generations. As twilight descended over the forest, the horse and its bear guardians melted away into the shadows between the trees, leaving no trace of their incredible ceremony except in Aiden's memory. The crystalline formation had disappeared completely, though its echo remained in the network of symbols that now lay dormant beneath the snow. Aiden stood alone in the clearing, forever changed by what he had witnessed. The forest around him felt different now, more alive, more aware. He understood that some mysteries were meant to remain mysteries, their power lying not in their explanation, but in their very existence. The horse and its bear guardians would continue their ancient duty, protecting secrets that were better left untold, maintaining a balance that had existed since the dawn of time. Dear listeners, we hope this mystical journey through Blackwood Forest has captured your imagination. To continue exploring such enchanting tales, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking on your left. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore the mysteries of our world. Join us in the comments below to share your thoughts about the ancient guardians of Blackwood Forest. We can't wait to hear what you think about this magical tale.